Right. So right as I started this Hangout, Windows 10 Cortana thought that something I said was addressed to it, and so it started to load a web page right as the broadcast was starting. So that was distracting.
Yeah, and it made you kind of like break up on my screen.
Well, that's okay, because we're able to start now, for real, talking about Survivor, back for season 30. And before we get too far into it, I just want to thank all the listeners and viewers for giving us the second chance. I think, the mistakes we made in previous seasons were maybe not promoting enough or having a consistent enough schedule, but we hope we can really just learn from our mistakes this time and win that $1 million or whatever in this season.
So now that you've summed up the entire episode, we are done.
Yeah, all right. Short and sweet.
I mean, listen, it's going to be a good season. I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
It was fairly underwhelming of an opening episode.
Well, I was stunned when the clock kept ticking and we were like an hour in before we had a challenge, which I don't necessarily object to, but it just seemed like it felt off. Like, they've had premieres before where we didn't have a challenge until later in the episode, and we've had longer premieres before, but I don't know, in this episode, I felt like the challenge came too late in the episode.
That's because nothing was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there was no drama. There was nothing, nothing was happening. It's just like, we're building a shelter, and some of us spend more time on the beach.
And we have to discuss endlessly the old school versus the new school.
Yes.
To make sure that everybody understands that some people are old school, and some people are new school, and some people played old school before, but now are more into the new school strategy. And then some of the new school people feel like maybe the old school people are going to be more dominant in challenges, so maybe we should go over there. And so then we have some people who are maybe going to play both schools at once, but that's not allowed because, of course, you have to pick one or the other, and there's no gray.
And Spencer is new school, but because he's a longtime fan, he can also be old school if he wants.
Yeah, honorary old school.
Honorary old school. Like, it was just, literally nothing. That was not dramatic. There was no dramatic tension there. Like, the most drama came from, okay, Vetus is kind of creepy, and Abby Maria is still unpleasant. She's just trying hard not to be unpleasant.
I was fascinated, but not surprised by Abby Maria in this episode. Just because it was it's like if you were writing a soap opera, this is what would happen with her character. It's like she goes out of her way to accurately sum up exactly what she did the wrong last time and express what appeared to be a sincere intent to correct that behavior and do better, and then proceed to do exactly what she did before while making it clear to everybody that she wasn't doing what she did before.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yes. But still, come on. They usually can cook up some good drama going into the vote. The best they had was Vetus is annoying, so is Abby Maria. But he's also creepy, so let's just get rid of him.
Well, and apparently,
that was the most they could get.
And they apparently cut stuff out of that tribal council, where apparently just before the vote, Jeff Varner goes over to PG and who was the other one? Now I can't remember. Kelly, maybe, saying, "Now, are you guys still leaning the way you were in the water?" And then Terry's like, "What? What are you asking them for? What is this?" And apparently that was right before the vote, and they didn't show that.
That was in a deleted scene or something?
There was the Dalton Ross's interview with Vetus. Vetus talked about it. Although I think Dalton also mentioned it in his questions for Probst. But yeah, apparently that happened too.
That was the most dramatic thing that happened in the entire episode. I wish we had seen that.
I think they probably didn't show it because it would have leaned in the direction of telling us which way Jeff was going and break the suspense of the voting.
There was no suspense in these votes.
I don't know. I was, maybe just because I was rooting for Abby Maria to. So it was one of those things where who the votes would be split between was not suspenseful, but exactly how the votes would break down, I wasn't sure.
That's true. I think I just didn't care.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't know. I liked Vitas. I didn't want to see him go. I did want to see Abby go, so that's where I was.
I mean, I wasn't actively rooting for him to go, but at the same time, I just didn't.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's certainly other players that I would have been more upset to see go.
Yeah. I mean, he was doing the thing. There was something, like, I just remember, like, he was doing that, like, super flirty thing in the last one, and he had this, like, really arrogant tone about it that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And so to see him, he didn't say anything obnoxious this time, really. I mean, but he was just so weird, and it's like,
well,
I don't need to see any more weeks of him putting his junk in people's faces and stuff, you know?
So he said in the interview that he was not doing that sort of thing constantly. It was just that one time, but of course that's what they show in the episode. And of course it is, because that was, I mean, it wasn't fun exactly, but it was certainly the sort of thing that you put on TV shows.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, that's... So in any case, though, let's actually, before we get into too far into the episode, first of all, I can confirm that it was Kelly Wentworth and PG that Jeff went aside to. Also, I want to just go on the record that it's weird that there are two Kellys that last names both start with W and end with Worth. Kelly Wigglesworth and Kelly Wentworth, and they put them on the same tribe. And I remember thinking to myself initially that I was in a hurry for them, one of or the other of them, to get voted out so that it would make taking notes easier. But I don't know. I actually kind of like both of them, so I don't really want either of them to get voted out. But I want one or the other of them to get a definitive nickname, and I would rather it not just be their last names, because that's not easy to type either. So just wanted that on the record. But anyway, the other thing that I was interrupting our forward progress for was that we got a YouTube comment on our pre-show. And it was actually somewhat critical, but I thought I would read it anyway because it could prompt some reflection. This is from YouTube name Just Buck, saying, your review about PG is so shallow and, sorry to say, stupid. You spent most time of her slot talking about season, not about her. Are you guys even a fan? Yes, PG was feisty, but also very strategic. It was her that put throwing challenge for strategic move in the map of Survivor. Duh. Gosh, I know I shouldn't have seen this silly post. So I gather that some of the language, there's a language barrier stuff there in terms of the various, some slight grammatical irregularities there. And I don't mean to read this only to make fun of those. But just what I said in the reply was that, you know, hey, our style is to just go by what we happen to remember, not necessarily to do a lot of research up front. And so maybe that's not everybody, and he clearly has a favorite, so he remembers more about her than we did.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, it was just sort of a, I want to reward interaction even when it's people saying that we're shallow and stupid.
I mean, I didn't remember her. I didn't. So maybe that is shallow, me to not remember her.
Well, I think it's also just an illustration that different people have different favorites, and you remember different things about different people, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I liked PG in this episode, what we saw of her.
Yeah, I mean,
I thought she handled Abby Maria very well, considering.
Yeah, and I recognize her. Like, I didn't recognize her really much from the photos because, she's just like she's aged, like she looks a little bit different, and not like in a bad way, but she's just like her body type is a little bit different. I remember like she was like really wiry. Now that I see her, is what I picture. Like really, really thin, and now she's just more of a normal sized person. And so, like, I think in her pictures that made her look more different.
She looked really skinny in that picture that they had of her in the post we were following.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So in any case,
I recognize her now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but I wanted to read that, like I said, partly just because I do actually want to reward comments, whichever opinion they may have. But also just because it is a valid point to just reflect that, even if, not everybody reacts to every Castaway the same way. I mean, you and I frequently are pretty aligned. Like, we'll have different favorites sometimes, but it's fairly rare that one of us will really like someone and the other really not.
Yeah.
But everybody's a little different. And in any case, it wasn't like we didn't like her. It was just
didn't remember.
Yeah, I had to make a point. It's like, it was like years ago, right? And we have been doing this for every season. That's like a couple of hundred Castaways that we've had since her. So cut us some slack, dude. Anyway, though. Survivor Second Chance premiere. We spent the first 20 minutes going one by one with almost everybody saying what they didn't do right last time and what they're going to do right this time, which I'm not even really complaining about. I'm just observing because it went on for a really long time.
Right. And they had that weird gimmick where they would they'd be in a car and then they would be in a boat and then they would be back in a Jeep or I don't remember the order. I just remember they had a lot of different transports.
Yeah, they did go by some cool stuff too, though. I mean, just going through the busy market street was pretty cool. And then they went through the Angkor Wat temple. That was awesome.
Yes. That's
something I would totally like to see in real life.
Yeah, I mean it worked for what they were doing,
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why I want to say I'm not unhappy with this episode by any means. I mean, I don't want to. Yeah, it was a fine episode. It was informative. We got to reconnect with and kind of remember who these people were. If you hadn't watched the pre-show or hadn't done the pre-show research, you get a little glimpse. And if you hadn't watched the other seasons, that's what we also have to think about too. Is they?
Oh, it froze up a little bit. Something we have to remember about other seasons is I'm going on because I see you frozen at the moment, but looks like you're back now. But you were just saying,
yeah.
So you were just saying something we have to remember about other seasons.
Is that something we have to remember is that not everyone watching has seen the other seasons, so they have to cater to the audience that may not know anything about these people and won't have watched a pre-show or looked at anything. It's just literally sitting down on a Wednesday and it comes on. They have to engage those people and get them on board with what's going on. So we did kind of need this. And it was fine. I didn't mind it. Like you said, it had some really cool scenery behind it, so the gimmick worked. And that it wasn't just talking heads coming and telling us everything. There was enough interesting stuff woven in that it worked. But it was also just a bolt on of a half an hour to the show to do all that,
Well, so this episode was not action packed. I mean, I felt like the high points were enough to leave me feeling pretty positive about the episode overall. There definitely were some parts that were more targeted, like you say, to people who haven't watched as much as we have. And, giving us I honestly think they did a pretty good job of giving us a good introduction to most of the castaways and setting up the beginnings of several different subplots and storylines that they might follow as the season develops.
Yes. I agree with that also. But so I joke and say nothing happened because nothing dramatic happened. And that's one of the things is these people have all played before. They're not going to go and stir up a bunch of shit on the first day. Like, it's just they know to you press the accelerator a little bit, but you don't go into it full speed.
Mm-hmm.
Even the new school, there's some organization of the strategy at the beginning, but you come on too strong and you alienate yourself.
Yep.
So there was a lot of feeling it out, kind of probing this relationship, probing this one, establishing those like tribes within tribes of the old school, new school. Like, that all is interesting, but it's not stuff happening. It's just the beginning of watching them relate to each other. That's all.
It's funny you mentioned probing because this is jumping ahead to the end, but it called to mind one of the rare cases I can think of that it felt like Probst didn't know what question to ask, because near the end, just before the voting, he kind of says, so what else should I know? There's an elephant there. What's the elephant in the room? And it just felt like such a broad, vague question that he's just like, he's having to reach for something, which he doesn't usually have to do, I feel like.
Right, because I think they're all, well, first of all, they didn't come in with a unified, I think part of that's because they came in abruptly.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't all on the same story, and they hadn't had all the stuff happens between when you're going to tribal council and when you go to tribal council, and then and then people can talk about that. When nothing happens between those things, and these are all really good players, so they are playing everything a little close to the vest in a weird situation like that. So yeah, Jeff's not getting a lot out of him because they're not going to offer up a bunch of information yet because they don't know how anybody feels because they haven't had a chance to discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Anyway, I didn't mean to take us all the way to the end, but when you were talking about probing here, probing there, it made me think of that. So after we're going to learn from our mistakes montage, we get introduced to our two tribes, which I have in handy list form. So I'm just going to go ahead and read them really quickly because hearing a list of names is compelling audio and will help everybody to remember. Sarcasm, but I'm going to do it anyway. So there is the Bayon tribe, Bayon. Another brief editorial assertion. Despite being spelled very differently, the two tribe names sound fairly similar when there's a lot of background noise. Bayon and Takeo. I noticed a couple of times that I couldn't quite make out which one Probst said when he was yelling it, across the water. Anyway, so on the Bayon tribe is Joe, Jeremy, Sierra, Stephen, Tasha, Kimmy, Cass, Keith, Monica, and Andrew. Then on the Takeo tribe, Vitas, Spencer, Terry, Abi Maria, Wu, PG, Shireen, Jeff, Kelly Wentworth, and Kelly Wigglesworth.
Yes.
Yeah. I feel like we spent more time with the latter tribe, I think, and probably both because and in preparation for they were the ones going to tribal council.
Yes.
But so anyway, I liked, what did you think about the whole boat supplies setup? So it's almost like a challenge, like a mini challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because it's like, you know they're both going to leave at the same time, so it's just kind of like who's going to flinch first, who's going to start packing their boat to the point that they're going to leave, which is just going to make the other tribe do it. There's not really a strategy behind that. It's just that, so it was kind of interesting to watch, how they sort of kept an eye on each other. It was almost like a little gunfight, a gunfight, like who's going to make the first move.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I thought it was interesting that whichever Kelly it was, just decided to start swimming.
Wigglesworth.
Yeah, because they said, it's the first person there. Clearly, the way that Jeff said that, the intention was always that somebody would swim for it at some point.
Well, oddly enough, in the questions that Dalton Ross asks Jeff Probst, that article on EW.com, what Jeff Probst said actually is that it never occurred to them that someone might try to free swim it. They had always assumed that people would stay with the raft, and so they didn't have camera coverage ready to follow swimmers swimming ahead of the rafts.
That's why it was all those overhead shots?
Yeah.
Interesting. So it was just weird how they positioned it and said, like, the first person. Maybe did they expect them to, like, get into some kind of battle royale on the thing?
I don't know. I mean, I think they just thought that it would be a raft race, not a swimmer race.
Well, it ended up being cool how it was like, depending on when you decided to swim,
Mm-hmm.
So Kelly got that idea in their head when all of a sudden they realized, wow, the raft's not catching her.
Mm-hmm.
So Joe decided to start swimming, and then Wu had a phenomenal idea, which was, to jump in right when Joe passed him, so he had more energy.
Yeah,
So
he was fresh.
Joe's. Yeah, so he was fresh,
mm-hmm.
as opposed to like everybody kind of like watching whether Joe could catch Kelly or not.
Mm-hmm.
Wu was like, yeah, let's not worry about whether he catches Kelly. Can he catch me?
Yeah. Well, and I suspect that if Kelly hadn't done it first, I don't know if anyone else would have done it, because it might have been one of those things where the challenge was explained that you take the raft to the rice without explicitly saying that you couldn't do it. And so at that point, they could have made the rule that the first raft that gets there, but then at the same time, that might be hard to judge if they're pretty even, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought that was interesting. Although one of the things I was thinking about that first boat with all the supplies on it is it seemed like they were getting a lot of stuff compared to previous seasons.
Yeah. But it seems like it was also like the stuff that they're normally just given was also on the boat.
Yeah, but they were getting like chickens and fruit and stuff like that. I feel like that's usually stuff they get as rewards later.
Yeah, true.
Anyway, I mean, it's all relative because they're obviously
just wanted to get some chickens up in there just to see if it would fire up Kimmy again.
Yeah, I would believe it. And also, I think they kind of obfuscate exactly what supplies everyone is given anyway. Like the fact that they do get sunscreen, but they don't make a point of showing that on the show, for example. There's a little bit of, I can't think of what the term I was going to use is, but just in the sense of they obfuscate a little bit on the details of those things usually. So it's hard to know whether it's really more or less than what they would normally get. But I thought it was kind of fun, but it didn't feel completely to me like a substitute for an early episode challenge. And with the long episode too, I think it was just, I definitely, by the time we were at like 45, 50 minutes in, I was starting to feel like the challenge should have been about now. In any case, let's see. So as you mentioned, Wu ended up getting the rice for his tribe. And I was thinking too, just in terms of all of the, the interstitials, I really like all of the Buddhist temple imagery that they're kind of flavoring this season with so far. So we start off at the Takeo tribe, and yeah, okay. I'm paranoid about my microphone cable. So this is where we get Kelly happy that everyone seems to be getting along. This is where we start getting our first discussion of the distinction between the old school and the new school, where the old school being more like this is an adventure that we're on together, and we are not yet at the part where we have to stab each other in the back and plot and scheme and stuff.
Right.
Versus the new school where it is the instant your foot touches the beach, even sooner if possible, you're figuring out who your alliance is, you're figuring out who's not in your alliance, you're figuring out who's your alliance within the alliance, you're doing all of that right away, maybe even doing a little idle searching.
Yes.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed the whole bit where Terry telling Spencer is like, my son told me, like I didn't know everybody, but my son watches all of them, and he gave me like a dossier on everyone, and he said that I should ally with you. And then we get Spencer going, okay. And then in the confessional, it's just like, what a gift. What an unexpected present to just be given, to have a family member of my fellow castaway here put in a good word for me.
Well, and it was much better than the words that Andrew Savage's daughters were putting in about Joe. Yeah.
There was such a great, like, perfect sitcom tension in that whole sequence of I'm phrasing this like a compliment when I explain to you that my teenage daughters found you very attractive. Now I'm just going to make intense eye contact for a moment.
Yeah, remember, you're a teenager. Yeah.
But of course, we also got early on, Abby Maria can't find her bag. That's weird. It was right over there. What could have happened to it? I don't know. Makes me wonder. As opposed to the idea that, hey, there was a lot of chaotic stuff going on. We just got off the raft with all that stuff. We're setting things up. Maybe it got misplaced somewhere.
Yep.
So instead of being suspicious about it, let's say, hey, can someone help me find it? But the way she's going around asking, it's like she's already accusing people. And, my first thought actually was that it may have fallen overboard while they were on the raft, but I guess she said she hung it up on a tree once they got there. And of course, the explanation was a perfectly innocent one, which is that she hadn't put a name tag on it, and PG thought it was up for grabs and didn't check carefully to see if it was empty. That seems pretty, that's a satisfying explanation to me.
Or satisfying enough to not get angry about it. You may be suspicious. And
just
like a little bit, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm going to trust PG.
Well, yeah, but exactly, and everything.
Count to 10.
Everything that Abby said about it was like the right thing to say, except that it was so obvious she was trying to convince herself more than anybody else, because she's making such an effort to not let her emotions take control. So I'm not going to say anything about it, but I know now. And now I'm going to go around and tell everybody else except PG how I know that it was her that had my bracelet in her bag, and she probably would say she didn't take it, but it's pretty suspicious anyway, don't you think?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you just...
I thought it was amazing that she was like, it showed her like going around to everybody.
Yeah.
And then PG just being like, you know what, screw this. Like, she didn't say that, but she went and talked to Abby Maria, and she's like, hey,
I'm getting this,
getting this vibe, hearing this things. Yeah, let me just tell you what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. So Abby Maria is doing exactly what I figured she would do. And I don't know, I suppose there's an aspect where it could be considered good TV, but I don't know. It's just that type of person really rubs me the wrong way, in a way that's not really fun for me to watch. So I don't know. I kind of would just as soon she go away. I
mean, I think if next time they lose, she probably will.
Yeah, obviously, even though they had to go to a last-minute tribal council, it was pretty clearly split between two people.
Yeah.
Although it could also, that could be read as it's already a fairly solid split between two possible alliances, and she is on the side that had more people. That would be the other way that could go.
I'm not sure that's how it went.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I'm just presenting that's, it's hard to know for sure because we don't see everything.
If it was based on two solid alliances, you would figure they would take out somebody more threatening from the other alliance.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to, it was just like, I think it just showed the kind of people who'd been having discussions.
Yeah. I don't think anybody wanted to keep Abby Maria. It was just a question of her first or not.
Yeah.
So let's see. We get a little bit more over at the other tribe, and we talk with Jeremy, who wants to be not seen as a threat this time, and so he wants to surround himself and ally with other people who can be kind of a shield and take the threat heat off of him, which is a pretty good plan.
Yep. And
especially this early in the game when you're not really worried about individual immunities yet. So he wants to be with Keith, which is not necessarily the obvious, to be a target person, but he has a previous relationship with Keith. Tasha, Andrew Savage, and Joe, who is no better shield than Joe.
Yeah, I mean, he's right about that.
Mm-hmm. And they are worried about the fish, as in Stephen Fishbach, who I don't know that he needs to be worried in any way, except that he certainly doesn't fit the profile that Jeremy said he was looking for.
Well, and he made a good point that, he was kind of awkward and on the outside in the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had to pair up with the most charismatic guy.
Yeah.
And help him make moves and use JT's charm to make the moves that they both needed to make.
Mm-hmm.
If he doesn't find that, he won't be long for the game. It's not like they're trying to get rid of him, but
of course, what happened the last time too, though, is that he was never able to get out from under his shield.
It's true.
So he needs to, we could make the case that although it worked for him in the sense of getting to the end, it was absolutely, as we've talked about, it was a second place game, not a first place game, right?
Yeah, I don't know that his personality is capable of a first place game though. Like to see him come into this and already be so paranoid and nervous.
Yeah. And
having to go look for an idol because he doesn't see any other solution. That's not a first place game either. We've seen that many times.
Yeah, I wanted to root for Steven, but I agree that he's not playing a first place game so far, especially the whole thing about looking for an idol and sort of abashedly realizing, they probably know I'm looking for an idol, but what are you going to do? That sort of mindset, that attitude is not, I don't think, going to take him far unless he can kind of turn that around a little bit. But in any case, Jeremy kind of sums up that segment by saying he thinks that they have the stronger tribe, which has not so far. Well, I guess they did actually. They did win the challenge, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah. This is also the bit where we got Andrew telling Joe that his daughters thought Joe was perfect. That sets up us to get some confessional from Joe, where he's saying that he knows that the alpha males can't ignore each other; they are going to either butt heads or align, and he is more than happy to have them align in this case, which makes kind of him and Jeremy's game line up neatly, at least for the early game.
Yep. Considering what happened to Jeremy last time, this is a perfect strategy.
Yeah, totally.
Because he ended up in that, whether he meant to or not, it was him versus what was the blonde guy's name?
I can't remember now. It wasn't
they both before they both got picked off in back-to-back weeks before even we were very far into the season.
Yeah. I could figure it out at some point, but I could kind of look it up. But in the meantime, we also got Andrew pushing a tree over. It wasn't clear if it was partially chopped down or if it was rotten or what.
I think he had been chopping it earlier. I think that did happen.
Yeah, it must have. It looked chopped when he pulled it over, but then everybody else acted like they were kind of saying like he just pushed it down.
Well, I think most of that was Steven, who was just totally awkward anyway.
Mm-hmm. So let's see. And that's, of course, was good setup for Steven to talk about feeling out of place, and then us to have a clip of him struggling to break a small branch off of a slightly larger branch.
That's right.
I did pull it up really quickly, and it was Reed that was voted off right after Jeremy. Josh was voted off right before Jeremy.
But Josh is who I meant, who I was thinking of. So I'm not saying he was voted off after. It was Josh and Jeremy were considered. They were
I think that's right.
They were the alpha males, in the thing. They were the two strongest. And then Josh got picked off, and then they immediately went for Jeremy right after that, who Josh had always wanted them to get off, but they took Josh. It was that weird thing where, you remember, after Jeremy got voted off, we were kind of well, who do we even root for now? The two best players just got thrown off the season, Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, so the strategy to not put yourself at odds with the other good players for Jeremy, considering what happened, that makes sense for him,
Mm-hmm. So he's definitely what we got in Steven's confessional, though, was that he is sensitive to not wanting to make the same mistake as last time, which we kind of just talked about. And then here's where we got Vitas talking about how he wants to, again, be aligned with the women on the tribe, but he also wants to not be seen as a manipulator and therefore a threat as a manipulator. But I guess his mode of trying to bond with women is it seems like it's kind of one note. Because at least three of the girls had expressed that it came across more smarmy than genuine.
Yeah, creepy yoga guy is his thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Meanwhile, Shireen did not miss a beat. She is just right back to where she was. Which is super intense, wanting to lock down alliances right away, talking a mile in a minute. And, that's clearly just who she is, right? So she's over talking to Spencer and Jeff Varner and pointing out, it's and you may not realize that he and him were actually best friends RS and Terry were best friends because they were on the same season together. So Vitas is like a connection between them. So they might, and she's just pointing out all these connections, and Spencer's just going, yeah, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Jeff is
yeah. And Jeff is oh my God.
Yeah. Now, at the same time, I think if not that conversation, then at least that feeling may well be a big part of what made him decide to vote with the new school players. Which is interesting since we kind of had a flip, because Vitas, although RS, his brother, had won on a so-called old school season, Vitas was only on a new school season, and yet he seemed to decide to go with the old school guys. Meanwhile, Jeff Varner, who is on season 2, decided to cast his lot with the new school players. Although I have to say I got tired of the old school versus new school dynamic pretty quickly, but I think we're going to have to get over that because they are not done talking about it. Yeah.
No.
So Jeff says feels like the train is only going to go as fast as the conductor will let it, but Shireen is hitting the gas and he is happy to be brought on board. And then immediately complains that something bit his ass. And in the confessional, he's sitting on the beach and it literally goes, "She's hitting the gas. What just bit my ass?" As he lifts his ass up to point it at the camera. We got a lot of good stuff from him in this episode. I'm just realizing how many notes I have about him.
He was good. He was funny.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm the OG here and I feel like a baby.
Well, I mean, I think he was one of the ones that sort of coined that whole old school, new school thing.
Yeah, him and Terry were the ones that seemed like they were the first ones to talk about it.
Yeah.
This is the point we talked about a little bit already, where Abby finds her bracelet in PG's bag, which we can't help but note that, okay, yes, she's suspicious because she knows she had her bag, she knows she had her bracelet. It's probably somewhere, right? But to find it in PG's bag when PG's not there clearly just means she was just rooting through everybody's bag. Which, I mean, okay, we kind of get what would inspire that. She's looking for her bracelet. She thinks somebody took it. But yeah, to just go and root through everybody's bag without permission is not 100% cool either.
Exactly.
And then her line there is, "It's very interesting." And I'm thinking, is it interesting, or is it just a dumb mistake that you should get over immediately? Because it is less than worthless to make an enemy on the first day.
Yes.
But of course, she's not going to do that. She's not going to make an enemy because she's not going to make any big deal about it at all. She's not even going to say anything. And she wants to make sure that everybody realizes that she's not going to say anything, even though she could, because it's very interesting that she found her bracelet in PG's bag and PG didn't say anything about it.
And nor am I. I'm not going to say anything to PG.
Not anything.
I'm not talking to PG about it at all. I'm not going to say a word.
And I couldn't help but notice that there were like 3 different people that laughed at her while she was doing her little rants at them. Because it was so obvious, I think, in everybody on that tribe just could read her like a book immediately. Because she's one of those people who is most transparent when she thinks she's being sneaky and subtle. Anyway, this is where PG, it's kind of just had the unfortunate bad luck of doing something to arise Abby's ire, which is exactly what happened on Abby's last season. Is that
would she call
little
herself
stupid things?
Dragon or something?
I don't remember. But that's what happened in the last time Abby was on too. Is that people kept sort of accidentally making her mad without even meaning to, and then just suddenly it's like the wrath of Abby was upon them, and they just had to weather the storm for a few episodes before she would lose interest and get mad at somebody else. So in any case, we have at the other tribe, we have Joe and Andrew in particular, a couple other people helping, but they're trying to make fire. This is where they all kind of look around and say, "So Steven's probably looking for an idol, right?" Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, he's weird. He has no alliance, and he's been gone for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. Cut to Steven looking for an idol. And Joe does succeed in making fire without Flint. Pretty impressive, especially
because he's perfect.
Yeah, well, and then Andrew mentioning too that I guess that it was very humid and the wood was not super dry, so he was doubly impressed. So we get some sunrise at yoga, pre-creepy yoga. This seemed like fairly ordinary standard yoga.
Yeah, except that some of the participants were being a little creepy.
Well, at least in this scene, it was this wasn't the.
Oh, this is not the
This was not the group yoga. Yeah, this was just Kelly and Vetus doing it at sunrise.
Yeah, that's right. No, yeah, there was the one later where like Tosh and Kimmy were both like.
But this is where also where Jeff Varner and PG went off and were in the water, kind of bonding, which I thought. I really liked the two of them as a potential alliance, just because it's not necessarily expected. Like I wouldn't have put those two together in my head, but they really did seem to connect as people who feel kind of caught in the middle between the two schools and trying to decide how to play that lie.
Yep.
So I would like to see them continue as an alliance together, those two. I lost my place in my notes. Oh no. So this is, they talk about Shireen pretty determined to target Vetus, although PG would rather get Abby out, which we're not surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like, yeah. So, and then we get, this is where we first hear from Kelly Wentworth, which was a ways into the episode, but I didn't mind so much because we got a lot of good stuff from her, because of course she got the highest drama of the episode, what with finding the clue and that whole deal. That was pretty great. I thought that was, that all by itself raised the episode up a star for me, that whole thing.
Yeah, you're right. It did.
So she starts off talking about wanting to play more assertively, and she does some idle looking in it, and first finds just what is a clue. But I love, we talked about this a little bit in the pre-show, but I love the idea of hiding the idol in the challenge, and it was exciting in execution as I could have hoped.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so that's just kind of a cool idea. Although this is also where I was noting that it's like, I feel like it's been a long time without a challenge. And then now was the Joga scene, because it was this other tribe. I thought it was interesting that we were seeing, lots of yoga going on with multiple tribes, because the Joga was on one tribe and then Vetus doing yoga on the other tribe. They kind of paired them together, so it almost felt like it was the same thing going on, but it's actually the different tribes, right?
Right.
But so we pair Joe leading almost his whole tribe, except for Keith, who is not impressed, in this group yoga thing. Cut to Vetus, stretching his idol at her, at Shireen. Yeah. that exchange was pretty great. It's like, she's looking at your idol. I don't want to see his idol.
That was a pretty funny.
Yeah. Well, and that scene, because it just kind of kept going too, and it just really did at a certain point feel like, is he doing that on purpose? Kind of almost hope not, because why? But if he's not, then he needs to be paying more attention.
Yeah. But yes, that's like his move. Like, I think that's like his move in real life and his move in Survivor is.
Well, I think part of it might be too that he's doing things that he might normally do in the real world without fully realizing the difference that his clothing makes.
It's true.
Also,
although he did choose those particular types of clothing that he's wearing.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah. But yeah, so that Kelly and Shireen in particular seemed like, they don't really want Vetus to be there anymore. And so lots of people are talking about Abby at this point, just because everybody seems to be on the same page in the sense of Abby is one of those people that the people who are better able to tolerate her win by virtue of not having to vote her out yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, we've kind of talked about other players like that in past seasons of just, you know, if someone else wants something more than you do, you kind of have power over them as a result.
Yep.
But at the same time, everybody seems to have her number. We're not really seeing anybody defending her. So in any case, we get the challenge. And how cool the idea, though, that it's the same as the very first challenge in the first episode in the first season. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
And it was not a bad challenge either. I mean, you know, I feel like as a whole, I think the challenge team has continued to evolve and improve over the seasons. But this was a pretty good one considering it was day one.
Yeah, and that we've used all the elements that are in it many, many times since then.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, of course, they have to move a big, heavy raft together, and in the meantime, light a bunch of torches along the way, and then have to do, you know, tying together sticks to get the keys in order to get through that final thing. And so the reward, of course, immunity and a fire-making kit and tarp. Although he specifically implied that the tarp was for keeping firewood dry, which might be what you want to do with it, but I couldn't help but wonder, like, so is it just a tarp, or is it like some special firewood tarp? Or is it just an assumption that that's what they would want to use the tarp for?
I don't know.
Anyway, not particularly critical. So it starts pretty even until Keith loses his fire, and their tribe falls behind a little bit because he has to kind of get it relit. So Takeo pulls ahead, getting out of the water first. And then as they, you know, of course, this is where the suspense starts, right? Because this is where they put the raft on the things, and we know because of the clue that's where the idol is. And I was surprised that she didn't really even seem to pause as she walked by it. And then what we got from her later was that it sounds like she maybe actually walked by it first without remembering, and then only kind of once she was past it did she realize, oh wait, I'm past it now, and now I would have to walk backwards to it.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. It's hard to tell if she like forgot or not forgot, but just didn't notice that she was walking by it, or if she just couldn't pull the trigger.
Yeah, because she was she was in the back as they were all going to the gate, and I was thinking that's the perfect opportunity to just reach under there.
Yeah, she
like, and if someone looked back, you just have to say, and if they don't see you with something in your hand, you just say, "Oh, I was just making sure the raft wasn't going to fall." You know, because that stage of the challenge doesn't require everybody's direct involvement, right? So I don't think it would necessarily look that weird if she was trailing a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You could be almost kind of like, oh, you know, catching my breath.
Yeah.
Oh, get up underneath it.
Although, as it happens, waiting for it to be a suspenseful moment in that whole stick thing turned out to be pretty good, because it meant everybody else was like, you know, they're watching like a hawk because they just want to see who's going to do it, right? So everybody's attention was elsewhere. But the great suspense, both of the challenge itself, but then also just keep cutting back to her looking back at the thing. I thought that was great. And I don't know about you, but I was actually definitely more interested in her, whether she was going to get the idol or not, than I was even about the challenge.
I agree. I was totally there.
So that was great. I feel like that was the high point of the episode for me, definitely. And it was exciting enough that I just like, it kind of elevated the whole episode for me. So in any case, it was interesting drama too, just in the sense that Kelly Wigglesworth had done this challenge the last time, and lost the last time, and unfortunately lost again. But yeah, that's a tough challenge, because it's definitely one of those ones where it's like, is it good enough to try? And if it's not there yet, you just wasted a bunch of time.
Yeah.
That was the siren.
Oh, you can hear that?
Yeah, just a little bit, but I thought you were whistling softly or something for a second.
No. It's literally you're like right there.
Yeah.
I guess they are meant to like be able to pierce through like everything. So.
Yeah, I mean it was quiet, but I heard it a little bit, and I just kind of thought you were going something like that. All right. But so in any case, after both of them kind of try and fail a little bit, Joe ends up getting the key, but then Kelly snags the idol, and it's like, yeah. But alas for her tribe, the other tribe wins. Joe wins the Bayon tribe, the first immunity challenge. And then Kelly Wigglesworth immediately goes into the, martyr mode, which I don't want to, I hesitate to say it like that way because I don't want to imply that it's insincere. But there is that element of putting it all on yourself so that other people will absolve you.
Yeah.
And I honestly, with her, I don't think that it was a put on for that ulterior motive.
No, because she's old school.
Mm-hmm. She was really trying, and she feels like she let herself down that she didn't win, and so you can see where she's saying that, and of course, by the same token, you could say it's like they came in with the lead. She was the one primarily responsible, and lost. So I mean, it is her fault more than anybody else's.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's never fair to really put it all on one person in a team anything, right?
Right.
But so in any case, another surprise, they're heading to tribal council right away. So what? I don't know. I wasn't sure how I felt about that, because on the one hand, it's it's a surprise, but I don't know. I felt like it disrupted the pacing of the episode was weird. First waiting so long to get to the challenge and then not having any post-challenge stuff.
Yeah, just go challenge to tribal council.
Yeah, I wasn't. I mean, I'm sure that's why the challenge wasn't earlier in the episode. But yeah, I wasn't 100% sure how I felt about that, because although certainly it creates chaos when they don't have the opportunity to talk more about it, it's the talking more about it and that strategizing and plotting that it's kind of the part of the show that I like the best. So in any case, though, as we get ready to go to commercial, we have Spencer saying, we have a tribe with Abby Maria, Jeff Varner, and all the crazies under the sun. And I couldn't help but notice that the editing places the camera squarely on Shireen as he says, all the crazies under the sun. I don't know.
Like put him on that one. Is Cass on? She's not on that one, right?
No, she's on the other tribe. Yeah.
She's the only crazy one still on there, but they almost they put it on there just to antagonize him.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of a slam on Shireen, which I don't quite think is fair. I mean, I think she's intense, but I wouldn't put her in the same crazy boat as Abby Maria.
No, and I don't. And you don't know that he meant it that way. That's just
I don't think he did. He certainly didn't say that. The names he mentioned were Abby Maria and Jeff Varner, but the camera made it clear that that was who the show was talking about.
Yeah.
Which was a little weird, especially since we didn't really get much from her in the tribal council itself. But why not? I suppose they had to have the camera on somebody. Because technically, I think that shot didn't show Jeff either. It showed Abby Maria and Shireen as he was saying that. But in any case, that brings us to tribal council. And they talk a little bit about the pressure of not wanting to let down the people who voted for them. What did you think about that whole theme?
I felt like it was something to like just to talk about. I don't think much of it.
Yeah, that was kind of my take too, that it felt a little bit like something you have to say.
Yeah.
Whether or not it really means anything to you. Yeah, so I don't know. I kind of felt that way too. And it just reminds me too of Vetus saying, he would have rather not get picked than to get picked and be the first out. And that struck me as a dumb thing to say.
Yeah.
No, you don't want that. That's not what you want. It's disappointing, but you don't think it would have been disappointing the other way too? And at least you got to be on TV again.
Yeah, and you got the opportunity. You
got a chance. You just weren't able to capitalize on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, and then we get an opportunity to talk a little bit about old school versus new school.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, finally.
I've been dying to talk about old school versus new school.
Yeah. Oh, and then next, PG gets to talk a little bit about getting an opportunity, a second chance, if you will, to learn from your mistakes.
Also a thing we have not explored yet.
So refreshing.
God, we've spent an hour and 20 minutes on this episode, and no one discussed how thankful they were to have a second chance and why.
Yeah. I was, however, tickled pink to have Abby Maria talk about all the times that she's already held back from being a firecracker.
I mean, she hasn't gone like fucking nuclear.
That's true, but it's also like nothing worth even being irritated about has happened.
Yeah, she talks all the time about how she hasn't, like we should be heaping praise on her for not fucking going ballistic on people,
Mm-hmm. You know what could have happened, Abby Maria? Instead of you rooting through everybody's bags and being suspicious and irritated, you could have been disappointed that you've misplaced your bracelet, but confident that there's only so much stuff around, it'll probably turn up, and then in a couple of days, Peachy finds it in her bag and says, "Oh, here it is all along. I'm so sorry, it was a mistake." And he gives it back, and now you can bond. But no, that's not how she operates.
No.
I just loved, though, that she's talking about all the times she's already held back. And everybody else kind of snickers. Vetus talks about how his brother is going to rub it in if he can't beat Terry. Which, I don't know, that one was weird, too. Vetus says a lot of things that feel just 20% off.
Yeah, and he has a really weird thing with his brother. Like, even though they bonded and like fixed a lot of it, it still exists.
Yeah. Well, and besides, like, this whole thing of like Eris and Vetus have a rivalry, and Eris beat Terry, therefore, if Vetus doesn't also beat Terry, Eris will rub it in. That seems more like something Vetus would be worried about than something Eris would actually.
It is. It has more to do with his perception of his relationship with Eris than an actual thing Eris would do to him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he doesn't want to say,
yeah,
I'm going to be mad at myself if I can't. Like, every chance I get, I need to equate myself to Eris. And if I've found this weird thing of like beating Terry would be equal to Eris.
Mm-hmm.
And I've created this in my head. Like, he can't say that, so he has to say Eris would rub it in. He has to distance himself from the thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we get a little bit of Kelly Wigglesworth talking about how going to tribal so fast makes things uncertain. But then, oddly, given what we know now, Jeff Varner talks about how he thinks people already know who they want to vote for, so it won't be random. But then apparently before the votes happen, he also still turns to Kelly Wentworth and PG to say, "Are you still leaning towards who you were saying in the water?" So that's weird, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, of course, that was all before about everybody reading the signs, that whole discussion. Wu says the vote will set the tempo of the game, which is such a nonsense, non-meaning tribal council thing to say.
But that's just how Wu talks.
Yeah. I wasn't really critical. It was just kind of, that's one of the things. See, you almost have to give Wu credit for it, because that's the sort of thing that people who know how to handle Jeff say in tribal council. I was surprised that Jeff let him get away with it, but I guess, it's early. Because he followed that by saying, I don't know where I'm going yet. And then Abby Maria suddenly says, oh, I see the division now. It's a male thing. And we're all like, well, okay, no, that's not exactly what it is at all, because we spent so much time already talking about old school versus new school. It is not about gender. But I think at this point she was absolutely reading that people were irritated with her.
Yeah.
And even though it wasn't enough to get her voted out, I think she was very nervous and smelling that tone in everybody, hearing, I guess, the tone rather than smelling it.
Just sort of threw out there like, oh, the guys are talking about me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to, or the guys are talking. I'm getting the feeling they mean me.
Mm-hmm. She instantly launches into being passive aggressive about it too.
Yeah.
Like, I know you're talking about me.
Because you're male.
Yeah. He's already said he's going to vote for me. Yeah. But yeah, so this is also, though, where Probst did he had that really vague, like, probing question, like, anything else you guys want to tell me? Which was just so uncharacteristic of him. I just couldn't help but notice it, especially with the follow-up of, there's an elephant here. What's the elephant in the room? It's just like, what? He's like, did the summer hiatus make you a little rusty there, Probst? What's going on there?
I honestly think it's because everybody like everybody talked in like those platitudes, like Wu did. Like no one really gave any substance, and so that's why he's like throwing things at the wall. That it's weird that they left him in. Like he may say shit like that other times.
Yeah, and we just don't usually see it.
Yeah, to try to get a reaction like. There's an elephant in the room.
Maybe they thought that just the elephant line was funny enough, so they kept it.
Yeah, I don't know. He was just kind of throwing stuff out there, though. Mm. And he may, like I said, he may do that. He may just throw things at the wall, and that may be how he gets some of these things. And be like, there's an elephant in the room. Let's talk about it. And somebody be like, okay, and then just spill everything they've been holding back. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah.
Well, so in any case, that was just about all we got before the voting. And so in my notes, what I have here is Wu votes Abby, Abby votes Vetus, PG dislikes a bug, Vetus votes Abby, Kelly votes Vetus. Because they really did cut this reaction shot from PG looking at some centipede or something. They cut it right into that voting montage, which was so weird because we're seeing people up there casting their votes.
Yeah.
And then a weird bug, and then PG going, and then back to voting.
Yeah.
I'm just like, what was that?
Yeah, that didn't need to be even if it happened at that moment, it didn't. I mean, that's the beauty of editing. You can put it wherever you want.
PG votes that bug out of the island. But in any case, Kelly does not play her idol, which of course she shouldn't because nobody was even talking about her. And then the votes ended up being 6-4. Vetus goes home. Abby got the other 4 votes. And so the smile on her face when Vetus went home was, it made me annoyed with her.
Yeah, it was way too smug considering you got 4 votes in an impromptu tribal council.
Yeah. But of course, it's possible that she is reading it in that other way that we talked about, where she's feeling like that just proves that my alliance beat your alliance. That may be what she's thinking, is like, I know that you were trying to target me, you and your people, but now we've proved that you're the minority. That may be why she's thinking that.
I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I don't think she doesn't sound like she thinks like that, you know?
She's probably she's so in the moment of, who, it wasn't me, it was him, ha! That sort of thing.
I mean, that's how she's behaved the whole episode.
You know, you have a point. You have a point. I'm a little surprised at myself that I'm bending over to give her as much hypothetical credit as I am, because I really don't like her. Yeah. But in any case, so the vote breakdown, the 4 votes for Abby Maria were Kelly Wigglesworth, as in the old school season 1 Kelly, and Terry, Wu, and Vetus. In other words, the old school players, even though Vetus is kind of a transplant, and Jeff Varner had been assumed to be an old school, but has now cast his lot with the new school.
Yeah.
So voting for Vetus was Abby, Jeff Varner, Kelly Wentworth, PG, Shireen, and Spencer.
Right. And so from the Alliance standpoint, who are the ones on there? It's Kelly, Terry, and who else? Who's the third one that's left?
Wu.
Mm-hmm. Who's also not really old school.
He's kind of borderline.
Yeah, so I think the 3 of them,
because he was on a more recent season comparatively, but the way he played the game is more like the old school players.
Oh yeah, true. The 3 of them, I think, are pretty adaptable. I don't think, like, if that truly was, which I don't think it was, like this Alliance thing, I think they can all manage to find themselves a home.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they can certainly recognize how this broke down and to say, okay, now we need to reshuffle.
Yeah. I'm pretty faithful in that those guys will be all right, you know.
Well, especially given that in our preview for next time, Abby returns immediately to old behavior, while Jeff Varner wants to change it up. That's what we're told.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, does anybody really want to keep Abby Maria around longer than Terry, Kelly, or Wu? Probably not.
Probably not, but it's like I said before, and it's how Abby went. So
if you hold on to her, you always have that person you can get rid of.
Yeah, because it's how Abby went as far as she did in her previous season, because she just because as long as someone else wants her out more than you do, you have that power. And she is that person that you can always get rid of later.
It's like you always like to tell like some sort of bizarre like analogy, so I'll do it this time.
Go for it.
So it's like the new versions of Tetris that you can play on your phone and stuff. You can bank, which I don't remember if the old ones could. You can like bank a piece, and then you can swap it in whenever you want. It's kind of like that. Like she's kind of like the banked piece. So, you know, you're going to do everything you need to and continue to work, but man, you need to ever pull in like, oh crap, I need that 4 tall. You just bring it in, you know.
I think that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in any case, I would just as soon have her leave sooner rather than later, because she creates drama, but it's awkward interpersonal drama more than it's gameplay drama, and that I don't know, her personality type is one that I have difficulty with.
Yeah, it belongs more on like Big Brother or something,
or Real Housewives or Jersey Shore or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to let her at least still be on a game show.
Yeah. So I don't know. I said in the pre-show that she was like, out of the whole list of people could even vote for, she was the one that I was most hoping would not be on the show. But well, we'll see. Who knows? Maybe she'll turn it all around. Maybe she will really learn her lesson.
Not likely.
I concur. Not likely, specifically because she thinks she already has.
Yeah. Not positive. So
no. In any case, I am optimistic about the season in general. I feel like there's lots of cool people to root for. We didn't even talk about some of them, like Tasha.
Yeah. We talked about how she kind of oogled Joe for a minute.
Yeah. But I liked Tasha before. I am looking forward to liking her again. I mean, when we get more from her. We didn't hear.
Now that I've solidified remembering who she is, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know that I fully grasped who she was in the pre-show. Now I do. And yep, I like her. Yeah,
and we've got Jeremy's got some cool stuff. Keith is always fun to watch. Spencer. We hardly saw anything at all from Kimmy or Cass or Monica or Sierra, really. But of course, most of them are on the other tribe that we just didn't spend as much time with.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that it seems like a lot of the people that we didn't, they're the ones that did the opening montage, were the people that we didn't spend a lot of time with in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Because Sierra was in that opening montage, like.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm not saying it was exclusive to them, but a lot of them that they knew, it looked like a lot of the people they knew they weren't going to get a lot of screen time in the episode. They put and let them have the little opening piece, because all the people, Monica, Sierra, Keith, like all of them had those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Going back up in my notes, I don't. This isn't necessarily exhaustive, but the people I noticed who didn't have have one of those opening ones, we didn't get one from Steven, Shireen, PG, or Wu in that, but we
didn't get Terry.
Yeah, but all of those people, you're right. We got at least something from in the episode.
Yep.
Yeah. So in any case. Looking forward to the season. So, do we want to handicap the season going forward? I think we have a couple of people that we can adjust our expectations for now, having seen the first episode. Like, I was really rooting for Steven going into the pre-show, but at least in episode 1, he doesn't really seem like he's got the game.
Yeah. Yeah, who could actually win? Like, I've thought about all the people I know that aren't going to make it super far, and but man, who we've got? We should handicap it though. I mean, I feel like maybe Joe, if he can get into the right thing, like that guy he could make it work. Like. I really like the way that Jeremy has approached it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that Jeremy's ability this time and even talking about how like he could never divorce the game last time from his wife's ousting.
Mm-hmm.
He feels like he never played as effectively as he could have.
Yep.
If that's true, and he's already come up with this great strategy, he was really good last time. So if he can be really good and a better strategist, he can be pretty dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's using Joe as a shield, I think that he's probably those are probably my top two. And, I understand that by being the favorites at the beginning, you make yourself a target. But I feel like those two guys, if anybody can make it through, one of them two will.
Yeah, I think those are both good choices. Jeremy was going to be one of my picks as well. I was really pretty impressed with Kelly Wentworth in this one, finding the idol and all, but not just in the fact that she now has the idol, but just the initiative and guts she showed in getting it.
I always liked her when she was connected to Dale, but he was just such a disaster that you could never again separate her from him, and so I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah. So I don't know necessarily that she'll win, but I bet she goes far. There would be a nice symmetry to the idea of having Kelly Wigglesworth go far too, just because the legacy aspect of that. And I mean, she's clearly like a power player, even early on in terms of being like notable. If people are paying attention, she's not going to be able to go under the radar.
Right, and she does have a way about her that, I don't want to say like it's a different kind of like, I don't want to say a second place game because you use that for like Steven, and I don't mean that she's playing a second place game. She has this presence about her where it's like, she's a strong person, but you want her around. You don't want to get rid of her. But at the same time, you don't necessarily want to be with her at the end anymore.
Yeah.
So I think she has a very long play in this game.
Well,
and see what she can do when she gets to the end.
If we want to talk about second chance narratives, like how great would hers be if she ended up taking the whole thing at the end?
Which also makes it that makes it hard when you start getting into like, if she can get into like 5s and 4s.
Nobody would want to go to the end with her.
No one wants to go to the end with her, because who wants to go against the person who lost to Richard Hatch, the fucking snake?
The first season.
Right, the first season. And to come back 20 years later or whatever,
15
years later.
15, yeah.
And to go and make it to the end and say, this time, I deserve it. That's you don't want to fuck with that. You don't want that in your. So it's going to be hard for her, but I think she is long for the game.
Yeah. And then there's lots of other people that I feel like I am excited to see them go far. Yeah. All right, so I think we have covered this premiere episode, and thank you everybody for listening and or watching. Remember, you can find old episodes either on the YouTube channel or at christianaellis.com, where you can also find the audio podcast if you're watching the YouTube. Vice versa, if you're listening to this on audio, you can also check out the YouTube version. And we'll be back next week for more Survivor.